For hundreds of years after the founding of the Republic, Rome sought to expand its territories through trade and conquest. Today we're going to talk about Rome's commercial network and something called the Punic Wars that happened with Carthage, which is about in this area, right in here. First, we're going to start talking about Italy. Okay. Rome conquers Italy. Roman power grew really slowly but steadily as legions, like we talked about yesterday, battled for control of this Italian peninsula here. Of course, they start off right here in Rome, and eventually they were able to defeat the Etruscans that were actually up here to the north, and the Greek city-states to the south. By 265 BC, the Romans were masters of this entire Italian peninsula. Rome had different laws and treatment for different parts of its conquered territory. The neighboring Latins on the Tiber, which they were, if you remember from yesterday, they were already in this area, became full citizens of Rome. In territories further from Rome, conquered people enjoyed all the rights of Roman citizenship except the right to vote. So we're still talking about maybe these regions in here. Citizens of Rome, but not able to vote just because it wasn't very efficient. All the other conquered groups fell into this third category. I mentioned this yesterday. So in the furthest reaches of the empire, they fell into this third category. They were supposed to be allies of Rome. Rome wouldn't interfere with any of its allies as long as they supplied troops for the Roman army and didn't make treaties of friendship with any other state. The new citizens and allies became partners in Rome's growth. This really lenient policy toward defeated enemies helped Rome to succeed in building a really long-lasting empire. For more than 200 years after 265 BC, Roman power spread far beyond Italy. Rome's commercial network. You don't need to write, you just need to listen right here. You've already done a piece of homework talking about the commercial network, so you just get to listen here. Rome's location gave it really easy access to riches of the lands ringing the Mediterranean Sea. You remember the Mediterranean Sea is all of this area. So smart of it to be centrally located there. Roman merchants moved by land and by sea. They traded Roman wine and olive oil for a variety of other foods, raw materials, and manufactured goods from other lands. However, other large and really powerful city-states interfered with Rome's access to the Mediterranean. One such city was Carthage. Here we go down here, and this is the city that's about to give us some trouble. And you're about to have to write about Carthage and a guy named Hannibal and his elephants. This had once been a colony of Phoenicia, which predated Greece even. Carthage was located on a peninsula of the North African coast, and its rise to power would soon put it in direct opposition with Rome. Okay, guys, now you need to be prepared to write. So we're going to talk today about a guy named Hannibal and how he is going to try to attack Rome, and he is going to first head to Sicily, Sardinia and Corsica, and give Rome troubles with regards to those three islands. And when fights over that gets bad, he is going to, instead of attacking Rome directly, he's going to go from Carthage to Spain, make this really long trip from Spain through Gaul, which is today's France, across and over the Alps, lose most of his men, almost all of his elephants, and try to attack Rome from north to south and surprise the Romans. He's able to be kind of successful, but we're going to talk about how the Romans respond and how ultimately Hannibal will be toast. Okay, now you should write, please. Now you should write. Rome spreads its power and war with Carthage. So in 264 BC, Rome and Carthage went to war. This was the beginning of a really long struggle known as the Punic Wars. Between 264 and 146 BC, Rome and Carthage fought 3 wars. The first, Punic War number 1, was for control of Sicily and the Western Mediterranean. So for example, in the last map that I showed you, the first thing that popped up were those 3 islands. Sicily is the island that the Italian boot is kicking, and then there are 2 other islands to the left. Those are the islands that Hannibal's father actually, that Carthage was initially fighting over. That first war lasted 23 years, from 264 to 241 BC. It ended with the defeat of Carthage, but it ended with a really, really angry Hamilcar Barca. So Hamilcar Barca is the father of Hannibal, and Hamilcar Barca is leading the charge in Punic War number 1. And when Hamilcar Barca goes back home after his defeat, he just is like a raging lunatic, and he's constantly raging to his son about how someday we need to go get, revenge upon the horrible Romans. And so ultimately, when Hannibal grows up, that's his story, right? That's what he wants to do, avenge his father's defeat. So here's a little bit about Hannibal. He's up here, okay? Here's Hannibal here, and a little bit more about that story. So Hannibal was born in 247 and died in 183 BC. And when Hannibal was only a little boy of 9, his father, Hamilcar Barca, the general of the Carthage army, made him swear that he would always hate Rome and to seek to destroy it. And so he is going to try. And I'll tell you more of that story at the end. Okay. There he is when he's a kid, and Hamilcar is going, "You will defeat the Romans." So in Punic War number 2, now Hannibal, the little boy, has now grown up, and he is going to avenge his father's defeat. So here's something about that. So the Second Punic War began in 218 BC, and the mastermind behind this war was a 29-year-old Carthaginian general named now Hannibal. Hannibal was a brilliant military strategist. He wanted to avenge Carthage's earlier defeat. So Hannibal assembled an army of 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 60 elephants with the intent of capturing Rome. Hannibal sought to surprise the Romans with a most daring and risky move. So he led his army on a really long trek from Spain. So here's Carthage down here. And and he is going to go this way and head across to Spain. Now, one of the tricky things was, this requires passage on water. And elephants don't exactly like being strapped to a raft and crossing water. So moving these elephants was really difficult. So he led his army on this really long trek from Spain, across France, over the Alps. This was tricky. They were literally working with pulleys to tie elephants and walk them over the edge of mountain cliffs and lower them down the other side with their soldiers. The elephants did not do so well in the Alps. If you can imagine elephants from northern Africa all of a sudden finding themselves in snow, they died massively. So he ended up with only a few of his elephants as he crossed the Alps and actually got down toward the Italian boot. So here he comes. Most daring and risky move, leads his army on this long trek. Despite losing half of his men and most of his elephants, the general's move initially worked. So for more than about 10 years, he's marching his troops up and down the Italian peninsula, not attacking Rome yet, but trying to gain some alliances and some help. He moves along the boot of Italy, and he's kind of successful. Hannibal won his greatest victory at Cannae in 216 BC. His army inflicted enormous losses upon the Romans. But the Romans regrouped, and with the aid of other allies, they stood firm and they prevented Hannibal from capturing Rome. So he wasn't able to actually capture Rome. Here's some renderings of them trying to get these elephants across the waterway and up the Alps. This was tough stuff. Okay. Now going back to finish. Okay, so Punic War #2, he's not able to capture Rome, so he is defeated. Although he does win some, does win some battles in Punic War #2, but never able to actually capture Rome. Now in Punic War #3, there's a Roman general named. Actually, this is still Punic War #2. So the way that this finally ends is that there's a Roman general named Scipio. There he is on the bottom right, looking kind of like he's got a lazy eye in his sculpture. Here he is down here. And Scipio decides that he's going to try this daring move. He is going to head to Carthage. So while Hannibal is moving up and down the coast of Italy and having some success, Scipio takes some Roman legions and he heads to Carthage. He thinks that Hannibal is going to be forced to run back home to protect his people and his homeland, which is exactly what happens. So Hannibal chases Scipio back home, but Scipio is there waiting for him. So Scipio is able to defeat Hannibal. So here's Hannibal moving. And then here's Scipio in pink. He's going to head from Rome, cross to Sicily, go to Carthage, and then wait for Hannibal. And when Hannibal gets to him, they fight something called the Battle of Zama. And Hannibal is defeated in his home territory. So sad for him. Okay, Punic War #3 is simply this last-ditch effort that Rome makes to assure that Carthage can never return. So the Romans found a daring military leader to match Hannibal's boldness, a general named Scipio, who devises a plan to attack Carthage and is finally successful. But during the Third Punic War, Rome laid siege to Carthage. In 146 BC, the city was set on fire, its 50,000 inhabitants sold into slavery, its territory was made into a Roman province, and Rome's victories in the Punic Wars gave it dominance over the western Mediterranean region.